The rain had been falling for 3 hours, and Karza was still standing in it, her green skin slick with water, her leather armor soaked through, and her hand trembling as it hovered near the wooden door she refused to knock on again. Nathaniel Hollis heard her out there. Of course he heard her. His cottage was small, the walls thin enough that he could hear the steady pattern of her breathing, the occasional shift of her boots in the mud, the way she would start to move toward the door and then stop herself. He sat at his table with his hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had long gone cold, staring at the grain of the wood, and he knew exactly what she was waiting for. He just did not know if he could say it. The fire in his hearth crackled, warm and inviting, while outside the autumn storm turned the dirt road into a river of mud. Nathaniel had lived alone in this cottage on the edge of Millbrook for 2 years now, ever since he had returned from the war with a limp in his left leg and nightmares that woke him most nights. The village tolerated him because he kept to himself, and because his father had been respected before the fever took him. They did not love him, but they did not chase him away either. Karza had no such luxury. He had met her 4 months ago when she had saved his life. Nathaniel had been foolish enough to go tracking a wounded deer too deep into the forest, into territory that everyone knew belonged to the orc clans. He had not expected to stumble into a bear trap, the old metal kind that some trapper had left decades ago and forgotten. The teeth had punched through his boot and into his calf, and he had been too shocked to even scream at first, just stared down at the blood and the metal and understood that he was going to die out here. Then she had appeared between the trees, moving silent as smoke despite her size. Karza stood nearly 6.5 feet tall, broad-shouldered and strong, with green skin that reminded him of summer leaves and small tusks that protruded just slightly from her lower jaw. Her black hair had been tied back in a warrior's braid, and she had carried a hunting bow nearly as tall as Nathaniel himself. She could have left him. Should have left him, probably. Humans and orcs did not help each other. They killed each other, or they stayed out of each other's way, and that was the whole of their relationship. But she had knelt beside him in the leaves, and her hands had been surprisingly gentle as she pried the trap open. She had torn strips from her own cloak to bind his wound, and she had hauled him onto her back like he weighed nothing and carried him to the edge of the forest. She had not spoken a single word until she set him down within sight of his cottage. "You should not go into the deep woods alone," she had said, her voice low and rough. "Not all of my people would help you." Then she had been gone, melted back into the trees before he could even thank her. He should have let it end there. But Nathaniel had always been too curious for his own good and too aware of debts unpaid. A week later, when his leg had healed enough to walk without crying, he had gone back to the forest edge with a basket of food. Bread, cheese, smoked meat, apples from his small orchard. He had left it on a flat stone with a note that said only "thank you." The next morning the basket had been returned, empty and clean, with his note still tucked inside, but written below his words in charcoal were new ones. You did not need to do this. So he had done it again, and again. And each time there would be a note, a few words in awkward handwriting, and eventually he started writing back. The messages got longer. He learned that her name was Karza, that she had been cast out of her clan for showing mercy to human prisoners during a raid, that she lived alone now in a cave system that ran beneath the hills. She learned that his name was Nathaniel, that he had been a soldier, that he was trying to figure out how to live a life that did not involve killing. Then the notes turned into meetings. Brief at first, just a few minutes at the forest edge at dawn. Then longer. They would sit on the fallen log that marked the boundary between human and orc territory and talk as the sun rose. She told him about orc customs, about the clan structure, about the foods they ate and the songs they sang. He told her about books, about the sea he had seen once as a child, about the way bread dough felt when you kneaded it just right. He did not remember when he fell in love with her. It was not a single moment but 1,000 small ones. The way she laughed, a deep rumbling sound that made him want to tell more jokes just to hear it again. The way she listened when he talked about his nightmares, never offering empty platitudes, just sitting with him in the weight of them. The way she had once braided a crown of wildflowers and put it on his head, solemn as a queen, and told him he looked ridiculous. But he had never said the words, because saying them would make it real, and making it real meant confronting what it would cost them both. 2 weeks ago, someone from the village had seen them together. Nathaniel did not know who, but word had spread fast. The village elder, Marcus Green, had come to his door with 3 other men and told him in no uncertain terms that he was to cut off all contact with the orc creature. That humans and orcs did not mix, that it was unnatural and dangerous, and if he continued, he would no longer be welcome in Millbrook. Nathaniel had told them to leave his property. But he had been afraid, and the fear had made him stupid. The next morning when Karza came to their meeting place, he had not gone, or the morning after that, or the one after that. He thought she would understand. He thought she would be angry maybe, but that she would know it was for her own safety as much as his. That putting distance between them was the smart thing, the rational thing. He had not expected her to come to his door. The first knock had come an hour after sunset. He had been sitting by the fire trying to read and failing to focus on the words. The knock was firm but not aggressive, 3 measured strikes against the wood. He had not answered. "Nathaniel," her voice had called through the door. "I know you are in there. I can hear your heartbeat." He had sat frozen, barely breathing, hating himself. "The villagers spoke to you," she said after a moment. "I understand. I do not blame you for this." A pause. "But I need to hear you say it. I need you to tell me that you want me gone." He could have done it. 3 words, "Go away, Karza," or even just, "I do not want to see you anymore." He could have freed her from whatever hope she was carrying, let her move on, find her own path without him weighing her down, but the words stuck in his throat like poison. "Nathaniel," she said again, softer this time. "Please." He had pressed his hands over his face and said nothing. That was when the rain had started. Just a drizzle at first, the kind of gentle autumn rain that was more mist than anything. He heard her move away from the door and he thought she was leaving. He almost went after her then, almost flung the door open and called her back. But he did not. And she did not leave. He realized she was still there when he heard the soft creak of leather, the sound of her settling into a stance. He went to the window and carefully pulled back the curtain just an inch. She was standing in his small yard, 10 feet from the door, her arms at her sides, her face tilted up to the sky. The rain was picking up and it ran in rivulets down her face, dripped from her tusks, soaked her clothing until it clung to her. She was just standing there, waiting. That had been 3 hours ago. The rain had turned into a proper storm, the kind with thunder that rumbled through the hills and lightning that split the sky. The temperature had dropped, and Nathaniel could see even from his window that she was shivering now, though she had not moved from her spot. She would not enter until he said the words. He understood that now. It was not about permission to come into his home. It was about permission to be in his life. She was giving him the choice, the power, and she was making it clear that she would stand there in the cold and the rain for as long as it took for him to decide, or until he broke her heart enough that she finally left. Nathaniel stood up from the table. His leg ached the way it always did when the weather turned foul, but he ignored it. He walked to the door and put his hand on the latch. All he had to do was open it. All he had to do was ask her inside and say the 3 words she was waiting for. I love you. That was it. That was all. And it would mean becoming an outcast from the only human community for miles. It would mean danger, both from humans who saw their relationship as betrayal, and from orcs who might see Karza as a traitor made worse by association with him. It would mean building a life on the margins, in the space between 2 worlds that neither wanted to share. He let his hand fall away from the latch. He returned to the table and sat down. He put his head in his hands. And he listened to the sound of the rain and the sound of her breathing, and hated himself more than he had ever hated anything. Another hour passed. The storm showed no sign of letting up. Nathaniel tried to tell himself that she would give up soon, that she would see sense and leave, that she would be better off without him anyway. She was strong and skilled and capable. She did not need a broken human with a bad leg and worse nightmares, but he knew he was lying to himself. The knock came again, weak this time, barely audible over the storm. Then her voice, hoarse and tired. "Nathaniel, I'm getting very cold." That almost broke him. The simple honesty of it, the admission of vulnerability. Karza was proud, fierce, a warrior who had once told him she had killed a cave lion with nothing but a knife. And she was standing in his yard telling him she was cold because she could not bring herself to leave without an answer. He stood up again, walked to the door again, put his hand on the latch again. This time he opened it. The wind immediately tried to rip it from his grip, and rain gusted into the cottage. Karza stood where she had been for the last 4 hours, drenched and shaking, her skin pale from cold, her eyes locked on his. She did not move toward the door, did not speak, just waited. "Come inside," Nathaniel said. She shook her head slowly. "Not until you say it. You are going to freeze to death." "Then say it. Karza, please say it." Her voice cracked, raw with emotion. "Tell me you want me here. Tell me I am not just something you were passing time with until it became inconvenient. Tell me that these months meant something to you, or tell me to leave and mean it this time. But I will not be dismissed like I am nothing. I will not be ignored like I do not matter. Say the words, Nathaniel." Lightning flashed, illuminating her face, and he saw tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. "Why?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Why are you doing this? Why not just leave? Find someone from your own people, someone who will not make your life harder than it already is." "Because I love you, you stubborn fool," she said, and the words hit him like a fist to the chest. "Because when I am with you, I feel like I am not a monster. Because you make me laugh and you listen when I speak, and you look at me like I am beautiful even though I know what humans think of orcs. Because for the first time in my life I want to build something instead of just survive. And if you do not feel the same, then tell me and I will leave and you will never see me again. But if you do," her voice dropped to a whisper, "if you do, then say it. Please, I am begging you, just say it." Nathaniel felt something inside him crack open, all the fear and doubt and self-preservation crumbling away. What was safety compared to this? What was acceptance from a village that barely tolerated him, compared to the love of a woman who would stand in a storm for 4 hours just to hear him admit he felt the same? He stepped out into the rain. Karza's eyes widened as he walked toward her, limping through the mud, rain instantly soaking through his shirt and plastering his hair to his head. He did not stop until he was right in front of her, close enough to see the gold flecks in her amber eyes, close enough to feel the heat coming off her despite the cold. "I love you," he said. "I have loved you for months and I have been too much of a coward to say it. I am sorry. I am so sorry I made you wait. I am sorry I did not come to our meeting place. I am sorry I let fear make me cruel. I love you, Karza. I love your strength and your laugh and the way you say my name. I love that you are kind even when the world has given you every reason not to be. I love you, and I want you in my life, and I do not care what anyone else thinks about it." For a moment she just stared at him. Then she surged forward and pulled him into her arms, lifting him off his feet, and kissed him. Her lips were cold from the rain, and her tusks pressed against his cheeks, and it was awkward and perfect. And Nathaniel wrapped his arms around her neck and kissed her back like he was drowning and she was air. When they finally broke apart, both gasping, she set him down gently and pressed her forehead to his. "You made me wait 4 hours," she said, but there was no anger in it, just wonder and relief. "I know, I am an idiot." "Yes, you are." She kissed him again, softer this time. "But you are my idiot." "Come inside," he said, "before we both catch our death." This time, when he took her hand and led her toward the cottage, she followed. Inside, Nathaniel quickly shut the door against the storm and turned to find Karza standing in the middle of his small living space, dripping water onto the floor and looking around with open curiosity. She had never been inside his home before. All their meetings had been in the forest, in the space between their worlds. "You need to get out of those wet clothes," he said, then immediately felt his face heat. "I mean, I have blankets, and I can make tea, hot tea." A smile tugged at her lips, the first real smile he had seen from her tonight. "I know what you meant." He grabbed every blanket he owned and turned his back while she peeled off her soaked leather armor and outer clothing. When he heard her settle onto the bench by the fire, he turned back to find her wrapped in 3 blankets, still shivering but no longer the alarming pale color she had been. Her long black hair hung loose and wet down her back. Nathaniel busied himself making tea, very aware of her eyes following him around the small space. His hands shook slightly as he poured hot water from the kettle over the herbs. When he brought her the mug, their fingers brushed, and he felt that same jolt of electricity he had felt the first time she had touched his hand. "Thank you," she said quietly. He made himself a cup and sat down across from her. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, drinking tea in the warm firelight while the storm raged outside. There was so much to say, so much to figure out, but for now it was enough to just be here together, on the same side of the door. "I was starting to think you would not open it," Karza said finally. "I told myself I would wait until dawn, but I do not know if I would have lasted that long. You should have knocked harder, yelled, broken the door down." She shook her head. "No, it had to be your choice. I could not force my way into your life. You had to want me here. I do want you here. I have wanted that for longer than I cared to admit." "What changed? Why tonight, after making me stand there for so long?" Nathaniel looked down at his tea. "You said you were cold. And I realized that I would rather face every consequence of loving you than live with the consequence of losing you. I would rather be cast out of the village than cast you out of my heart." He met her eyes. "I was afraid, but I am more afraid of a life without you in it." Karza set down her mug and stood up, blankets falling away. She was still dressed in her underlayers, damp but decent, and she crossed the small space to kneel in front of him. "I am afraid too," she admitted. "This will not be easy. My people will not understand. Yours will not accept it. We will face danger from both sides. I know. We may have to leave this place, find somewhere new where neither of us are known. I know." She took his hands in hers. Her palms were warm now, rough with calluses from years of fighting and hunting. "But I think we can build something good. Something that is ours, if we are brave enough to try." "I think so too." She leaned forward and kissed him again, gentle and sweet, and Nathaniel felt the last of his fear melt away. They would figure it out. They would find a way. Because love was not the absence of fear, it was choosing each other despite it. The storm continued through the night, but inside the cottage it was warm and safe. They talked for hours, making plans, discussing possibilities. Karza knew of places deep in the wilderness where they could build a homestead, far from both human and orc territories. Nathaniel had skills as a farmer and hunter, and Karza was one of the best trackers he had ever seen. Together, they could be self-sufficient. As dawn approached and the rain finally began to ease, Karza stood to leave. Her clothes had dried by the fire, and she dressed while Nathaniel packed her a bag of food for the journey back to her cave. At the door, she turned back to him. "Will you come to the forest edge tomorrow?" "At our usual time, I will be there. And the day after that, and every day after until we can leave together." She smiled, fierce and bright, and kissed him one more time. Then she was gone, slipping into the pre-dawn mist like a ghost. Nathaniel closed the door and leaned against it, exhausted and exhilarated. He had just committed to leaving everything he knew, and he had never felt more certain of anything in his life. But first, he had to face the village. He waited until full morning, until he knew the village would be awake and going about their daily business. Then he washed, dressed in his best clothes, and walked the mile into Millbrook with his head held high and his heart hammering in his chest. The village was small, maybe 40 families, clustered around a central square with a well and a meeting hall. People stopped their conversations when they saw him coming. Word traveled fast in small places, and he had no doubt that someone had seen Karza at his cottage last night. Marcus Green was standing outside the meeting hall talking to 2 other elders. He saw Nathaniel approaching, and his expression hardened. "Nathaniel Hollies," Marcus said as he drew near. "I had hoped we would not need to have this conversation again." "I am not here to have a conversation," Nathaniel said calmly. "I am here to tell you that I am leaving Millbrook. I will be gone within the fortnight." That caused a stir among the gathered villagers. Marcus frowned. "Leaving? Where do you intend to go? That is my concern, not yours." "I own my cottage and land outright. I will sell it before I leave if anyone wants to make an offer. If not, it will simply stand empty." "This is about the orc, is it not?" asked Sarah Winters, one of the elder women. Her tone was not unkind, just weary. "Nathaniel, you are young and you have been alone for a long time, but this is not the way." "That creature, her name is Karza," Nathaniel interrupted, his voice sharp. "And she is not a creature. She is a person. She saved my life. She has shown me more kindness and understanding in 4 months than anyone in this village has in 2 years." "She is an orc," Marcus said flatly. "Her people have raided our farms, killed our children. We lost 12 people in the raids 5 years ago. You cannot have forgotten that." "I have not forgotten. I also know that we have killed orcs, that humans and orcs have been at war for generations, and both sides have blood on their hands. But Karza is not her people, any more than I am responsible for every crime any human has ever committed. She was cast out of her clan for showing mercy. She lives alone because she refused to kill when her clan demanded it." He looked around at the gathered crowd. "You say she is a monster, but the only monstrous thing I have seen is how quickly you all judged her without ever speaking to her." "Pretty words," Marcus said, "but you are still a fool. That orc may have fooled you, but mark my words, you will regret this. They cannot be trusted." "She stood in the rain outside my door for 4 hours last night," Nathaniel said quietly. "She was freezing and exhausted, and she could have broken down my door or left or any number of things. But she waited. She trusted me to make the right choice, and I did. I choose her." He turned to address the whole village. "I am leaving, and I am going with her. You can think whatever you want about that, but I will not be shamed for loving someone who has shown me nothing but loyalty and courage. I hope you can find it in yourselves to understand. But if you cannot, that is your burden to carry, not mine." With that, he turned and walked away. No one tried to stop him. No one called after him. He walked back to his cottage with his shoulders straight and his head high, and if there were tears on his cheeks by the time he reached his door, there was no one around to see them. Over the next 2 weeks, Nathaniel prepared to leave the only home he had ever known. He sold his cottage and land to a young couple from the next village over for less than it was worth, simply because he did not have time to wait for a better offer. He packed his tools, his clothes, his small collection of books. He said goodbye to the few people in Millbrook who had ever shown him genuine kindness, and every morning he met Karza at the forest edge. They used those meetings to plan in earnest. Karza had found the perfect location for their new home, a valley 3 days' journey north, sheltered by mountains and accessible only through a narrow pass. There was a river for water and fish, good soil for planting, and game in the surrounding forest. It was far enough from both human and orc territories that they would not be bothered, but not so far that they could not trade if they needed to. "It will be hard work," Karza warned him. "We will have to build everything from nothing. Shelter, a garden, stores for winter. We will have to be completely self-sufficient." "I am not afraid of hard work," Nathaniel said. "I am afraid of mediocre work, of living a half-life because I was too scared to reach for what I really wanted." She had kissed him for that, soft and lingering, and told him he had a poet's soul in a farmer's body. On the last morning before he left, Nathaniel walked through his cottage one final time. It felt strange to see it empty, all his possessions packed into the cart outside. He had been born in this cottage. His mother had died here. His father had taught him to read at that table, to cook at that hearth. So many memories lived in these walls, but they were just memories. His future was waiting in the forest. He locked the door, left the key under the mat for the new owners, and walked away without looking back. Karza was waiting at their meeting place, and she was not alone. Nathaniel stopped short when he saw the massive brown pack horse standing beside her, laden with supplies. "I had stores in my cave," Karza explained. "Furs, tools, preserved food, enough to get us started." She smiled. "I have been preparing for this for weeks. I knew you would come. You had more faith in me than I had in myself. I saw who you were when you first left that basket of food." "You are brave, Nathaniel Hollies. You just do not always remember it." They set out together, Nathaniel driving his cart and Karza leading the pack horse. The journey north took them through wilderness that grew wilder with each passing day. They saw no other people, human or orc. Just forest and hills and the endless autumn sky. They talked as they traveled about everything and nothing. Karza told him stories of her childhood in the clan, of the rigid hierarchy and the constant tests of strength. She had never quite fit in, she admitted. She had always questioned too much, felt too much, wanted more than just to fight and die for the clan's glory. Nathaniel told her about his time in the war, the things he had seen and done that still haunted him. She listened without judgment, and when he could not find words for the worst of it, she simply took his hand and walked beside him in understanding silence. On the second night, they made camp in a clearing beside a stream. Nathaniel built a fire while Karza hunted, and she returned an hour later with 2 rabbits already skinned and ready to cook. They ate sitting close together, shoulders touching, and watched the stars come out one by one. "You regret it?" Karza asked quietly. "Leaving your home?" "No," Nathaniel said, and he meant it. "That cottage was never truly home. It was just where I was hiding. This," he gestured between them, "this feels more like home than that place ever did." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they stayed like that until the fire burned down to embers. They reached the valley on the afternoon of the 3rd day, and Nathaniel understood immediately why Karza had chosen it. The valley was beautiful, a wide expanse of meadow grass bordered by forest, and sheltered by mountains on 3 sides. The river ran clear and cold through the center, and there were fruit trees growing wild along its banks. A person could build a good life here. 2 people could build a better one. They spent the rest of the daylight hours exploring, finding the best spot for a cabin, marking where they would plant the garden come spring, locating a natural pool in the river that would be perfect for bathing. By the time the sun set, they were both exhausted and exhilarated. That night they slept under the stars, wrapped in blankets and in each other's arms, and Nathaniel felt a peace he had not known since before the war. Maybe before even that. Maybe his whole life had been leading to this moment, this place, this woman. The next morning they began to build. It was hard work, just as Karza had warned. They started with a simple shelter, just a lean-to against a large boulder that would keep the worst of the weather off them. Then they began cutting timber for a proper cabin. Karza was stronger, but Nathaniel was skilled with an axe and saw, and they worked together with increasing efficiency. Days blended into weeks. The autumn deepened, the leaves turning gold and red before falling. They worked from dawn until dusk, felling trees, trimming logs, notching them together. Slowly, impossibly, a cabin took shape. It was rough and simple, just one room with a hearth and a loft for sleeping, but it was theirs. They chinked the gaps between logs with moss and mud. They built a door from split planks and hung it on leather hinges. They fashioned a stone hearth and chimney, and the first time they lit a fire inside, the smoke drew perfectly and the whole space filled with warmth. Karza had stood in the center of the cabin with tears in her eyes. "I never thought I would have this," she said. "A home that is mine, ours." Nathaniel had pulled her close and kissed her forehead. "Neither did I." They built a small barn for the animals next, knowing they would need livestock come spring. They dug a root cellar into the hillside and stocked it with the preserved food Karza had brought, and the vegetables Nathaniel had managed to buy in the last village they had passed through. They cut firewood, stacks and stacks of it, until their hands were covered in blisters and their backs ached. But every night they fell asleep together, warm and safe and happy, and every morning they woke up and chose each other all over again. Winter came early that year. The first snow fell in mid-November, soft and quiet, turning the valley into something out of a fairy tale. They were prepared. The cabin was sound, the food stores were full, and they had plenty of firewood. They settled into the slower rhythm of winter, spending their days maintaining their supplies and their home, and their evenings by the fire. It was during those long winter nights that Nathaniel truly got to know Karza in ways he never had before. She taught him words in the Orc language, the harsh consonants and rolling vowels that sounded like stone breaking and rivers flowing. He taught her to read, slowly and patiently, and watched her face light up the first time she read a full sentence on her own. She told him about Orc courtship rituals, the elaborate tests of strength and endurance that potential mates were supposed to undergo. "I am supposed to make you prove you can provide for me," she said, amused. "You are supposed to bring me the head of a dangerous beast or defeat me in single combat." "I do not think I could defeat you in single combat," Nathaniel said honestly. "No, probably not, but you built me a home." "That seems more impressive than any dead beast." He told her about human marriages, the ceremonies and vows and rings. "In my village, the couple would stand before the whole community and promise to love and care for each other for the rest of their lives." "That sounds beautiful." "But we do not have a community. We have each other. That is enough." On the longest night of winter, with snow falling outside and the fire burning bright, Nathaniel took Karza's hands in his and spoke the vows he had memorized from the human ceremonies he had attended. "I, Nathaniel Hollies, take you, Karza, to be my partner in life. I promise to love you, to respect you, to stand with you in joy and in hardship from this day forward, for as long as we both live." Karza's eyes were bright with tears. "I do not know the human words," she said, "but in my language." She spoke a long phrase in the orc tongue, the words flowing like music. Then she translated, "I choose you as my mate. I will defend you with my strength. I will shelter you with my body. I will feed you from my kill. I will stand between you and death. This I vow by blood and bone, by earth and sky, until I return to the stone." "That is beautiful," Nathaniel whispered. "It is the old vow, the one orc warriors speak to their chosen. I never thought I would say it to anyone, and I certainly never thought I would say it to a human." She smiled through her tears. "But you are mine, Nathaniel Hollies, and I am yours. We do not need a community to witness it. We do not need a ceremony or rings or approval. We know what we are to each other." He kissed her then, long and deep, and they made love for the first time with the firelight dancing on their skin and the snow falling soft outside their home. Winter passed slowly, but not unhappily. They were isolated in their valley, but they were not lonely. They had each other, and that was all they needed. Nathaniel's nightmares became less frequent, soothed by the sound of Karza's breathing beside him. Karza's old wounds, the ones she carried from being cast out by her clan, began to heal in the safety of being loved unconditionally. Spring came like a promise. The snow melted, the river swelled, and the valley burst into green life. They planted their garden, neat rows of vegetables and herbs. They cleared more land for planting grain. Nathaniel built a chicken coop, and Karza returned from a hunting trip with 3 hens and a rooster she had traded a deer hide for from a hermit living in the mountains. "He did not ask questions," she said. "Just said he was too old to care about chickens anymore and was happy to be rid of them." Life settled into a comfortable pattern. They woke with the sun, worked the land, hunted and foraged, improved their home. They were healthy and strong and happy. The garden flourished. The chickens laid eggs. They caught fish from the river and smoked them for storage. They made cheese from the milk of a goat. Nathaniel bought on a rare trip to a trading post 2 days south. Summer arrived in a blaze of heat and growth. Their first harvest was small but successful. They picked berries and made preserves. They swam in the river pool on hot afternoons, and Karza taught Nathaniel to dive from the rocks, laughing when he belly flopped and surfaced sputtering. One evening in late summer, as they sat outside their cabin watching the sun set over the mountains, Karza said, "I am happy. I did not think I could be after everything, but I am." "So am I," Nathaniel said. "You ever miss it? Your old life?" He thought about it honestly. "I miss some things. I miss books sometimes, though we have the ones I brought. I miss bread from a baker, though yours is better than anything the village baker ever made. But do I miss my old life? No. I miss what I thought my life could have been before the war. But this," he gestured at the valley, the cabin, her, "this is better than anything I imagined for myself." She took his hand and laced their fingers together. "I love you. I love you too." As summer faded into autumn again, marking a full year since Nathaniel had opened his door and finally said the words, they prepared for their second winter together. This year they were more experienced, more prepared. They had more supplies, more stored food, more firewood. They were ready. One morning in early October, Nathaniel woke to find Karza already up and standing at the window, looking out at the valley with an expression he could not quite read. "What is it?" he asked, joining her. "I heard something last night while you were sleeping, voices distant, coming from the pass." Nathaniel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Humans or orcs, I could not tell, but they were arguing. "Whoever they are not here peacefully." They spent the morning preparing for the possibility of visitors, wanted or not. Nathaniel checked their weapons, such as they were a hunting bow, a few knives, his old sword from his army days that he had kept more out of habit than any desire to use it. Karza readied her own weapons, the bow and hatchet she used for hunting. The visitors arrived just after midday. There were 5 of them, all orcs, and they came down from the pass in a tight group, armed and wary. Karza recognized them immediately. "My brother," she said quietly, "and 4 warriors from my old clan." Nathaniel's hand went to his sword, but Karza stopped him with a look. "Let me speak to them first." They met the orcs in the meadow between the cabin and the tree line. Karza's brother, who she had told him was named Grukath, was huge even by orc standards, nearly 7 feet tall and broad as a barn. He had the same green skin and amber eyes as Karza, but where her face was often open and expressive, his was like stone. "Sister," Grukath said in the orc language. Then his eyes found Nathaniel and his expression hardened further. "So it is true. You have taken a human as a mate." "I have," Karza said calmly, responding in the common tongue so Nathaniel could understand. "And what business is it of yours? I was cast out of the clan. What I do with my life is no longer your concern." "It became our concern when rumors reached us that an orc and a human were living together in the northern wilds. The clan elders sent me to confirm it and to bring you back. I will not go back. You do not have a choice. The elders have decided to forgive your past mistake. You can return to the clan with honor, but you must leave the human." Nathaniel stepped forward. "She is not leaving me, and she is not going anywhere she does not want to go." Grukath looked at him like he was an insect. "This does not concern you, human. This is clan business. She is my wife." "That makes it my business." That caused a stir among the orc warriors. Grukath's expression shifted from contempt to shock. "Wife, you married this creature." "I did," Karza said firmly. "By human custom and by the old orc vows, he is my mate and I am his. I chose him freely, and I will not unchoose him because the clan suddenly decides it wants me back." "You would throw away your people for this?" Grukath demanded. "For a weak human who will die in a few decades, who cannot even properly defend you?" "He is not weak," Karza said, her voice dangerous now, "and he does not need to defend me. I am not the one who needs defending here, brother." Grukath's hand went to his weapon, and instantly Nathaniel drew his sword. The other 4 orcs reached for their weapons as well. For a long, tense moment, everyone stood frozen, one wrong move away from violence. Then Grukath let his hand fall. "The elders will not be pleased. The elders cast me out when I showed mercy. They do not get to suddenly decide they want me back when it is convenient for them. I have made a new life. I have a home and a mate who loves me. I am happy. Tell the elders that Karza of the Stone Fist clan is dead. This is just Karza now, and she is exactly where she wants to be." Grukath stared at his sister for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, something in his expression softened. "You truly are happy." "I am." He looked at Nathaniel, assessing. "And you truly love my sister. This is not some curiosity, some human fancy that will fade." "I love her more than anything," Nathaniel said firmly. "I left my home for her. I built a life with her. I will protect her with everything I have. She is my world." Grukath was silent for a long time. Then he did something that shocked everyone. He clasped his fist to his chest, the orc gesture of respect. "Then I am glad she found you. Even if you are human." He turned to the other warriors. "We will tell the elders that we could not find her, that the rumors were false." "But Grukath," one of the warriors began. "That is my decision," Grukath said with finality. "Karza has made her choice. We will respect it." He looked back at his sister. But you cannot return, not ever. If you do, the elders will force the issue." "I understand," Karza said. "Thank you, brother." Grukath nodded once, then turned and led his warriors back up the pass. They disappeared into the mountains, and Nathaniel and Karza were alone again. Karza let out a long breath and leaned against Nathaniel. "I thought that would go much worse." "So did I. Your brother surprised me. He is a good male, stubborn and traditional, but good. He just wants me to be happy, and I think he could see that I am." They walked back to the cabin hand in hand, and Nathaniel realized that this was the final thread connecting Karza to her old life. She had now been found and released by her clan. She was truly free to build a future here with him without fear of being dragged back. That night, as they lay in their bed in the loft, Karza said, "I want to have a child with you." Nathaniel's heart skipped. "Is that possible?" "I do not know. I have heard stories of human and orc pairings producing offspring, but they are rare. It may not be possible." She turned to face him in the darkness. "But I would like to try. I would like to build a family with you if we can. This valley is large enough. Our home is strong enough. We could give a child a good life here." "A child would need other children eventually," Nathaniel said slowly, thinking it through. "Friends, playmates, we are isolated here." "I know, but perhaps, in time, we could find others. Other outcasts, other people who do not fit in either world. We could build a community of our own. A place where it does not matter if you are human or orc or something in between," Nathaniel said, warming to the idea. "A place where people are judged on their character, not their race." "Yes, exactly that. It would be hard. It would take years." "We have years, and we have each other. That is more than enough to start with." Nathaniel pulled her close and kissed her. "Then let us try, all of it. A child, a community, a future. Let us build something better than what we left behind." And so they did. Their second winter was quieter than their first, without the urgency of survival. They spent it planning for the future, talking about what kind of community they wanted to build, how they could reach out to others who might want what they were offering. Nathaniel wrote letters to leave at the trading post, carefully worded invitations for anyone who felt caught between worlds. Spring came again, and with it, their first visitor. She was a young woman, barely 20, with a human father and an orc mother. She had been turned away from both communities and had been living rough in the forest. She was thin and wary, but when she saw Karza and Nathaniel together, living openly as a couple, she had started to cry. Her name was Brenna Darcy, and she stayed. They built her a small cabin of her own on the other side of the valley. She helped with the planting and the animals. She had a gift for healing and began collecting herbs and learning their properties. She was quiet and skittish at first, but slowly she began to relax, to smile, to joke with them over dinner. That summer, 2 more people came. An elderly human man named Nathaniel's father's old war friend who had married an orc woman late in life, and they had been cast out of their village for it. They were tired of hiding and wanted a place where they could live openly. The community grew. Slowly, carefully, but it grew. Each new person brought skills and knowledge. They built more cabins, expanded the gardens, cleared more land. They built a common hall where they could all gather for meals and meetings. They established rules: respect, consent, honesty, and hard work. No one cared about race or background. Only about character. 2 years after Karza had stood in the rain outside Nathaniel's door, she gave birth to their daughter. The labor was hard, lasting through the night and into the next day, but Brenna was there with her knowledge of herbs and birthing. And Nathaniel held Karza's hand and whispered encouragement until finally, the baby arrived. She was beautiful. Tiny and perfect, with green-tinged skin and the smallest hint of tusks already forming in her gums. She had Nathaniel's brown eyes and Karza's black hair. She was healthy and loud and absolutely perfect. "What do we name her?" Karza asked, exhausted but radiant as she held their daughter. "I was thinking. Hope," Nathaniel said. "Because that is what she represents. Hope for a better future," Karza smiled. "Hope, I like it. Hope Hollies." "Hope Karza Hollies," Nathaniel corrected. "She should have both our names, both our families. Their daughter thrived and so did the community." By the time Hope was 3 years old, there were 15 people living in their valley. Human, orc, and mixed-race children played together without seeing differences. Adults shared meals and labor and stories. It was not perfect. There were disagreements and hard days and moments of doubt. But it was good. It was real. It was theirs. One evening, as Nathaniel stood on the porch of their cabin watching the sun set over the mountains, Hope playing in the grass with the other children, Karza came up behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist. "You remember that night?" she asked. "In the rain." "Every detail," Nathaniel said. "I think about it often, about how close I came to losing you because I was too afraid to say 3 simple words. But you did say them, eventually, and we built all of this from those words." She rested her chin on his shoulder. "I love you, Nathaniel Hollies. I love you, Karza Hollies." Their daughter looked up from her play and saw them standing together. She waved, her smile bright as the sun, and Nathaniel waved back. This was his family, his home, his future. And it had all started because a woman loved him enough to stand in the rain and wait for him to be brave enough to love her back. The valley continued to grow and change with the seasons. By the time Hope was 5, she had 3 other children her own age to play with, twin boys whose mother was human and father was orc, and a little girl who had been found abandoned on the road and adopted by Brenna. The children were inseparable, running through the valley like a pack of wild things, their laughter echoing off the mountains. Nathaniel built a schoolhouse that first winter after Hope turned 5. It was a small building, just one room with a hearth and benches, but it had a slate board on the wall and shelves for books. He taught the children to read and write and do arithmetic. Karza taught them survival skills, how to track, how to hunt, how to find water and edible plants. Brenna taught them about healing herbs and tending the sick. The community developed its own culture, a blend of human and orc traditions. They celebrated human holidays like the spring planting festival and the autumn harvest, but they also adopted orc customs like the strength trials in summer and the story circles in winter. They created new traditions, to a weekly gathering where everyone shared a meal and news, a day each month where everyone worked together on a community project. Word continued to spread. More people came, drawn by rumors of a place where race did not matter, where people were judged on merit and character. Some stayed only a few weeks before moving on, finding that frontier life was harder than they expected. But others stayed and built lives. When Hope was 7, a crisis came. A group of human raiders, outcasts themselves but violent and dangerous, discovered the valley. There were 8 of them, armed and looking for easy plunder. They came down the pass expecting to find a soft target. They found instead a community that would defend itself. Nathaniel and the other men, along with several of the orc women who were trained warriors, met the raiders at the valley entrance. They did not want violence, but they would not be victims either. Nathaniel, wearing his old sword and standing beside Karza, who held her great bow, called out to the raiders, "This is a peaceful community. We have nothing worth stealing and everything worth defending. Leave now and no one gets hurt." The raiders' leader, a scarred man with cold eyes, laughed. "Peaceful? You are humans and orcs living together. You are abominations. We are doing the world a favor by wiping you out." "Last warning," Karza said, her voice calm and deadly. "Leave." The raiders charged. The fight was brief and brutal. Nathaniel's sword sang as it parried and struck. Karza's arrows flew true, dropping 2 raiders before they made it halfway across the meadow. The other defenders fought with the desperation of people protecting their homes and children. When it was over, 3 raiders were dead, 4 were injured and captured, and 1 had fled back up the pass. The community had suffered too. 2 men were wounded, 1 seriously, but they had won. They had defended their home. The captured raiders were given a choice: leave and never come back, or stay and work under guard until they had repaid the damage they tried to cause. 3 chose to leave. 1, a younger man who seemed more lost than evil, chose to stay. Over the following months, he proved himself, working hard and eventually asking to become a full member of the community. They accepted him, and he became one of their best hunters. That victory, though costly, solidified something in the community. They were not just a group of refugees hiding from the world. They were a people, united by choice and commitment. They would not be pushed around or destroyed. They would stand together. As Hope grew older, Nathaniel sometimes caught himself watching her with wonder. She was so confident, so comfortable in her own skin, in ways neither he nor Karza had been at her age. She never felt like she had to choose between her human and orc heritage. She was simply herself, fully and completely, and that was enough. One night when Hope was 10, she asked about how her parents met. They had told her the basic story before, but this time she wanted details. "Tell me about the rain," she said, curled up between them by the fire. "Tell me why Mother stood in the rain." Nathaniel and Karza exchanged a look. Then Karza began the story, speaking of the isolation she had felt after being cast out, the unexpected friendship that developed, the love that grew despite all logic saying it should not. "I stood in the rain because I needed to know if what we had was real," Karza said. "I needed your father to choose me, not out of obligation or pity, but because he truly wanted me in his life. I needed to hear him say the words. And I was afraid," Nathaniel said honestly. "I knew that saying those words meant changing everything. It meant giving up the life I knew, even if that life was not very good. It meant being brave enough to reach for what I really wanted instead of settling for what was safe." "But you did say them," Hope said. "Eventually." "I did. And it was the best decision I ever made." Hope was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then she said, "I am glad you were brave, because otherwise I would not be here." Nathaniel felt his throat tighten. "Me too, little one, me too." The years continued to pass. Hope grew into a strong, intelligent young woman who inherited her mother's strength and her father's kindness. She became a bridge between the human and orc members of the community, translating not just language but understanding. She had a gift for seeing what people needed and helping them find it. When Hope was 16, she fell in love with one of the twin boys she had grown up with. His name was Nathan Green, named by his parents after Nathaniel, who had inspired them with his courage. Nathan was kind and funny and devoted to Hope, and Nathaniel saw in them the same kind of partnership he had with Karza. They married when Hope was 18, in a ceremony that blended human and orc traditions. The whole community gathered to witness and celebrate. Nathaniel walked his daughter to her new husband, and when he placed her hand in Nathan's, he felt both loss and joy. His little girl was grown, but she was happy and loved, and that was all he could ask for. By the time Nathaniel turned 50, the community in the valley had grown to nearly 50 people. They had proper farms now, a mill, a forge, a healer's house, even a small library that Nathaniel oversaw with pride. They traded with other settlements carefully and selectively, and maintained good relationships with the few neighbors they had. They had proven that it was possible, that humans and orcs could live together in peace, that love could bridge divides. That family was not about blood but about choice and commitment. Nathaniel's leg never stopped aching, especially in cold weather, and his hair was more gray than brown now. But Karza was still strong, still fierce, still beautiful to him. They had built something that would outlast them, something their grandchildren, for hope, had given them 2 grandchildren. A boy and a girl would inherit and carry forward. One evening, 30 years after that night in the rain, Nathaniel and Karza sat on the porch of their cabin watching another sunset. It had become their ritual, this quiet time together at the end of the day. Their hands were clasped, their shoulders touching, comfortable in the silence of long companionship. "You ever regret it?" Nathaniel asked, not for the first time. "Giving up your clan, your people, for this life?" "Never," Karza said, also not for the first time. "This is my clan now. These are my people, and you are my home." "I was thinking about that night," Nathaniel said. "The rain, how close I came to never opening that door. But you did open it. That is what matters. I made you wait so long. You made me wait exactly as long as you needed to. I knew you would come. I had faith in you, even when you did not have faith in yourself." Nathaniel lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "I love you. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, my stubborn, brave, beautiful human. You gave me everything I never knew I needed." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Down in the valley, lights began to appear in windows as families settled in for the evening. Smoke rose from chimneys. Children called to each other in the last games before bedtime. Life continued, rich and full and good. "We did well," Nathaniel said softly. "Did we not?" "We did better than well," Karza replied. "We built a dream, and we lived to see it grow beyond us." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Nathaniel thought about the man he had been 30 years ago. Scared, alone, broken by war and loss. That man could never have imagined this life, this love, this legacy. That man had needed a warrior woman with enough courage for both of them to stand in the rain and wait until he found his own courage. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For standing in the rain. For being patient when I was too afraid to be brave." Karza turned to him, and in the fading light her eyes were warm and bright. "You would have done the same for me. Love is not about grand gestures. It is about showing up day after day and choosing each other. You have chosen me every day for 30 years. That matters more than any words said in a storm." She was right, of course, but Nathaniel knew he would never forget that night, the rain, the fear, and the moment when he finally opened the door and let love in. That moment had changed everything. It had set him on a path that led to this life, these people, this happiness. Some doors, once opened, lead to worlds beyond imagining. He was grateful every day that he had found the courage to open his. As they finally stood to go inside for the night, their home waiting warm and welcoming, Nathaniel took one last look at the valley they had built together. Hope's house glowed with lamplight. The community hall stood solid and strong. The fields lay ready for spring planting. Everything they had fought for, worked for, dreamed of together. It had all started with 3 words, spoken too late but not too late after all. "I love you." Simple words. Powerful words. Words that could change a life or build a world. Karza squeezed his hand as they crossed the threshold into their home, and Nathaniel smiled. After 30 years, coming home still meant coming to her. And that would never change, no matter how many years they had left. They closed the door on the night, on the cold, on the outside world. Inside was warmth and love and all the small domestic comforts they had built together. Karza started preparing tea while Nathaniel added wood to the fire. These small rituals, repeated thousands of times over the years, were the foundation of their life together. Later, as they lay in bed in the loft that had been theirs for 3 decades, Karza said sleepily, "I would stand in the rain again, for you, every time." "I know," Nathaniel whispered, pulling her close, "and I would open the door sooner, I promise." She laughed softly. "We cannot change the past. We can only love each other in the present." "Then I love you, right now, in this moment. And I love you, always." They drifted off to sleep in each other's arms the way they had done thousands of times before and would do thousands of times more if they were lucky. Outside, the valley slept under the stars, safe and peaceful. Inside, 2 people who had defied the odds and built a life worth living rested in the certainty of their love. The story that had begun with a woman standing in the rain outside a closed door had become an epic of courage, commitment, and the power of choosing love over fear. And though many years had passed since that rainy night, the love that had been born then burned as bright as ever, a flame that warmed not just 2 hearts but an entire community. Some love stories end with the words, "I love you." This one began with them. And it would continue through whatever years remained, carried forward by Hope and her children, and all the people who had found refuge in a valley where being different was not a curse but a gift. Nathaniel's last thought before sleep claimed him was simple and true. "I am home." And he was. Finally, completely, irrevocably home, not in a place but in a person. In a choice made 30 years ago when a woman stood in the rain and a man found his courage. In every day since when they woke up and chose each other all over again. That was the real miracle. Not the standing in the rain, not the opening of the door, but the choosing. Every single day, through joy and hardship, through seasons and years, through everything life threw at them, they chose each other, and that made all the difference. The end came for them as it comes for everyone, many years later, when they were both old and gray and tired. They went peacefully, within hours of each other, as if neither could bear to be in the world without the other for very long. The community mourned them deeply, but also celebrated them. For they had lived full and beautiful lives and left behind a legacy that would endure for generations. Hope and Nathan took over leadership of the community, guiding it with the same principles of love and acceptance that Nathaniel and Karza had established. The valley continued to grow and thrive. More people came, seeking the refuge that had been created by 2 people brave enough to love across boundaries. And in the community hall, on the wall above the hearth, someone carved words that everyone who entered would see. She stood in the rain. He opened the door. Together they built a world. It was their story, yes, but it was also everyone's story, because everyone who came to that valley had stood in their own rain, waiting for their own door to open. And everyone had found the courage to choose love over fear, to build instead of destroy, to create community in the wilderness. That was the legacy of Nathaniel Hollies and Karza. Not just the physical valley and buildings, but the idea that love could conquer prejudice, that courage could overcome fear, that a better world was possible if people were willing to work for it. Years turned into decades. The valley became a village, then a small town. It became known throughout the region as a place of tolerance and peace, where anyone was welcome regardless of race or background. It became a beacon of hope in a world that often seemed too full of division and hate. And every year on the anniversary of the day Nathaniel and Karza had married, the community held a celebration. They called it the Rain Festival, and it honored not just the founders but the principle they had lived by. That love was worth fighting for, worth standing in the rain for, worth building a life around. Children grew up hearing the story of the woman who stood in the rain and the man who finally found his courage. It became legend, then myth, the details perhaps embellished over time, but the heart of it remaining true. Love matters. Courage matters. Choosing each other, day after day, matters more than anything. That was the message Nathaniel and Karza left behind, and it echoed through generations, touching lives they would never meet, inspiring courage they would never witness. All because one night, a woman refused to leave until the man she loved said the words, and because that man found the strength to open his door and his heart and say them, 3 simple words that changed everything. I love you. In the end, that is all any of us really need: to love and be loved, to choose and be chosen, to stand in the rain if we must, and to open the door when courage finally comes. Nathaniel and Karza's story was extraordinary in its ordinariness. 2 people who loved each other, despite the world telling them they should not. 2 people who built a life together through hard work and dedication. 2 people who left the world better than they found it. Is that not what we all hope for? To love and be loved, to matter to someone, to leave something good behind when we go. They did all of that and more. And it started with the rain and a closed door, and a woman brave enough to wait, and a man brave enough to finally say yes. Yes to love. Yes to risk. Yes to a future neither could predict, but both were willing to build together. That yes echoed through time, through generations, through the lives of everyone who ever benefited from what they created. One yes. One open door. One love story that became a blueprint for a better world. That was the legacy of Nathaniel Hollies and Karza, the human and the orc who loved each other when the world said they should not, and who proved that love is stronger than prejudice, braver than fear, and more enduring than any wall we build between us. Their story ended as all stories must, with death and parting. But it also never ended, because love like that does not die. It transforms, becomes part of the land and the people, woven into the fabric of a community that would carry their values forward into an unknown future. And somewhere in that future, other people would stand in their own rain, waiting for their own doors to open. And they would remember this story and take courage from it. Because if an orc and a human could build a love that lasted a lifetime and changed a world, then anything was possible. That was the true gift Nathaniel and Karza gave. Not just a safe valley or a tolerant community, but hope. Hope that love could conquer all. Hope that courage could overcome fear. Hope that a better world was not just a dream but a possibility, if only we were brave enough to reach for it. And so their story lived on, told and retold, changing slightly with each telling but always keeping the same heart. Love matters. Choose love. Stand in the rain if you must, but do not give up on love. That was the message. That was the legacy. That was the gift they left behind for anyone brave enough to accept it. And in the valley they built, under the mountains they loved, their memory was honored not with statues or monuments but with lives well lived, with love freely given, with a community that thrived because 2 people were brave enough to say yes to each other when the world said no. That is how a love story becomes legend, not through grand gestures or epic battles, but through the simple, profound act of choosing each other, every day, no matter what. Nathaniel and Karza chose each other. And in doing so, they changed the world, one open door, one spoken truth. One love that refused to be denied. That was enough. That was everything. That was the whole story and the only story that mattered in the end. They loved each other. And that love built a world. The end of their story was also a beginning for hope, for their grandchildren, for everyone who would come after and benefit from what they built. Life continued. Love continued. The valley flourished. And 2 names were remembered with gratitude and respect by everyone who understood what they had accomplished, not because they were perfect, not because their love was easy, but because they tried. They chose each other despite the obstacles. They built something beautiful out of rejection and exile. They proved that love could bloom in the most unlikely places and endure against all odds. That was their triumph. That was their legacy. That was the story that would be told around fires and in schoolhouses for generations to come. The woman who stood in the rain. The man who opened the door. The love that changed everything, simple, true, eternal. And that, finally, is where the story ends and where it also never ends, because love like that becomes part of the world itself, as permanent as the mountains and as necessary as the rain. They loved. They built. They endured. And the world was better for it. What more could anyone ask of a life? What better legacy could anyone leave? None. There was no better story than this. No better life than one lived in service of love. No better ending than this one. They loved each other until death parted them, and even then their love lived on in everything they had created together. Perfect. Complete, true, the story of Nathaniel and Karza. The human and the orc, the man and the woman. The two hearts that became one and built a world in the process. Their story was over. But love never ends. It only transforms, becomes something new, lives on in those who come after. And so it was with them. Their bodies returned to the earth of the valley they loved. But their spirits, their love, their legacy, those lived on forever in the community they built, and the lives they touched, and the hope they gave to everyone who heard their story. That is the power of love. That is the gift of courage. That is what happens when two people choose each other and refuse to let anything tear them apart. They change the world, one open door at a time. And that is how the story ends, with love triumphant, with courage rewarded, with a legacy that will endure as long as people tell stories about bravery and devotion, and the simple, profound power of saying, "I love you," and meaning it with your whole heart. Nathaniel and Karza. Two names, one love. A lifetime of choosing each other, and a world forever changed by their courage. That is the ending. And it is also the beginning of countless other stories, sparked by the example they set and the hope they offered. Love wins. Always. If we are brave enough to let it. That was their message. That was their gift. That is their story, the woman who stood in the rain, the man who opened the door, the love that built a world perfect, complete, eternal, true.